We'll get started. We're going to be recording the meeting, and I'm Neil Halpin. I'm the director of the UCLA Center for Healthier Children, Families, and Communities, and the PI on the Life Course Intervention Research Network. And this series of webinars, this is the third in our series of webinars on families, family function, family development that we're doing this year. And I'm going to be turning this over to my colleague Todd Jensen after I introduce our speaker today. And I'm really pleased to be able to have a session on Parent Nation, which is being sort of the brainchild of Dana Susskind and being led by Yolie Flores, who will be speaking with us today. And I'm real pleased about it because, one, I've known Yolie for almost 30 years, 25, 30 years, and have had a chance to work with her in a lot of ways. And I'll talk a little bit about her background, but also worked with Dana Susskind over the last 10 or 12 years. I got to know Dana when she started to work in the early childhood space, when she launched her 30 Million Words campaign, and was just amazed how a pediatric ENT surgeon sort of arrived in this early childhood space by storm and was really effective in the work that she was doing. And was in touch with her as she was starting to develop this sort of notion of Parent Nation, had an opportunity to talk with her about it, and then read the book that she wrote. And then I was even more pleased when she told me, well, the person who's going to be leading the effort is Yolie Flores. So Yolie is the national campaign director for Parent Nation, and she previously served as the chief learning officer of the campaign for grade level reading, which was also a really important, successful, impactful initiative, where she supported the network of more than 350 communities across the nation in their efforts to support parents as they work to ensure early school success for more children from economically challenged families. Since the beginning of her career, Yolie has recognized the incredible power of parents and has focused much of her work on promoting parent engagement and parent leadership. While serving as an elected member of the Los Angeles Unified School District Board of Education, Yolie authored the Parents as Equal Partners in Education of Their Children Board resolution. She was also CEO of Los Angeles Children's Planning Council, Los Angeles County's Children's Planning Council, where she launched Abriendo Puertas, Opening Doors, a nationally recognized parent leadership program for Latino parents with children 0 to 5. More recently, she was appointed board of directors of Parents as Teachers, the nation's most replicated early childhood home visiting program. And parent-teacher home visit. I'll also say that I had an opportunity to work with Yolie on a National Academy of Sciences panel on measuring children's health and well-being. And we served on that together for a few years, and she made really important contributions as a non-academic member of that very academic group. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd, who will sort of MC this, and I'm going to go dark because I have to move from where I am now to my office, but I'll reappear and pop up in a little bit. So let me turn it over to you, Todd.
Thanks so much, Neil, and welcome to all of you. So glad you could join us for this webinar. My name is Todd Jensen. I'm a faculty member in the School of Social Work at UNC Chapel Hill. And I'm the leader of the Family Measurement Node of the Life Course Intervention Research Network. And we're delighted to have Yolie Flores here with us. And so we'll definitely have some time here for Yolie to share some really fascinating content. And as she's doing that, for all of you here in attendance, please feel free to think of questions that you have that you'd like to pose to Yolie. I'll be thinking of some questions as well. So as we get closer to kind of the end of our time together, we can address those questions. You can pop them into the chat if you'd like to do that as well. So I will now turn the time over to Yolie.
Great, thank you, Todd, and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are, to each of you. I will take questions, but I only take softball questions, so I'm just letting you know. So first, thank you to Neil and Todd and to Mary and all of those that have been in conversation with me and Dr. Susskind about today and about sharing with you the work of Dr. Susskind and the work that I partnered with her on in this very, I think, ambitious and bold idea of moving us toward a society that better supports parents. So I'm going to walk you through, provide you a little bit of context about the work and about Dana, and then I'll enter into specifically the campaign itself and all of the ways in which we are interested in positioning parents as drivers of systemic change. So with that, I will pull up my slides and let's see if we can do it correctly. Oh, no, that's not it. I will be sharing that with you in a bit. Here we go. All right, this will, you guys are going to have to see a couple of my screens before I actually get there. Okay, presenter view. All right, how's that, Todd? Are we good? Excellent.
That's good.
So again, just another quick thanks, both on my behalf, Dr. Dana Susskind and the TMW Center for Early Learning and Public Health, which is where we birthed this idea, where Dana birthed this idea of a parent nation, where really parents are the drivers of systemic change. So for those of you who may not know Dr. Susskind, this is my partner, my colleague, who I've been working with for 1.5 years. Dr. Susskind is a pediatric surgeon, social scientist, a best-selling author. Neil shared a little bit about how he met Dana and the work that she's been doing. Let me just say that, you know, as a best-selling author, Dana as a surgeon entered into this space, and why she wrote 2 books now, the first being 30 Million Words, which some of you might be familiar with, and now Parent Nation, which came out in April of this year. And her intention really is to play a role as a social scientist, as a doctor, in positioning for all children to succeed in this country. She got very intrigued early on as she was asking questions about her patients and the challenges that many were facing around meeting developmental milestones. Started to ask a lot of questions as a doctor about really what was happening to her patients who had successfully, she's a cochlear implant surgeon, by the way. And that means she gives children that are born deaf the gift of hearing. But really, I started to ask questions about their challenges in meeting developmental milestones, despite now being able to hear, being able to access language. And that's what really drove her to dive into the neuroscience, the brain science, understand it better, make the science accessible and available to every parent. That was a big part of the first book she wrote, 30 Million Words. And later decided that she had one more book in her, and wanted to be more intentional about what she was pushing for in terms of this call to action, in a way that she didn't think her first book, in fact, she likes to joke that the first book, 30 Million Words, didn't do what she had hoped in terms of moving public policy, changing how we think about the importance of their first 5 years, et cetera. It didn't do that. She jokes that it actually only became a baby shower gift, not a bad baby shower gift. But it was one of the reasons that she wrote Parent Nation, so that she could get closer to this ideal of building a movement toward a society that better supports parents. So as context, in her book, Parent Nation, she weaves together the latest science on the developing brain. She shares the personal stories of extraordinary families, some of them families of her patients, and real world examples of innovative parent first programs. In the book, Dana argues that parents have the potential to be the most formidable voting bloc in the nation, but that potential is squandered. She talks about healthy brain development and how fundamental it's a fundamental condition for equality. She argues that if children are our future, supported, empowered parents are the key to that just and equitable, thriving nation. And as important, that raising children shouldn't be a lonely struggle, but a collective responsibility. And so the book is filled with stories of parents from all walks of life who share their love for their children, their hopes and dreams, but also their struggles and their own lack of optimism that they can truly give their children what they need to succeed in life. She uses the book as a powerful call to action, reminding us that we are the richest country in the world, and yet we've lost sight of what it is that's required to give all children a strong start on the road to being productive adults. The way that we've used the book, leveraged the book, and really taken some of the messages, some of the quotes here, are what is helping to reinforce the campaign that I'll talk to you about. Many ways, it's a book that challenges how we think about the early years in this country, that acknowledges that aligning the neuroscience and the brain science to the individual, meaning parents or caregivers, the tools that we give them, the information we provide them, that's important but insufficient, because if society isn't aligned to the neuroscience, it's unlikely that parents will be able to do all the things that we keep saying we need every parent, every caregiver, every adult to do in the very early years in particular, so that children have a good start in life. In other words, as a society, we are not creating the conditions in community for parents to succeed. And her call to action is that we must change that. We must mobilize and galvanize parents and caregivers and allies to push for a society that creates those conditions in community for parents to succeed, for their children to succeed. So I'm going to share with you 3 very short videos just to begin to share the campaign. This part of the campaign, again, around mobilizing toward a parent nation or a society that better supports parents. The first part of the campaign was a real, essentially a social media communication campaign. And through these videos, we've elevated the critical message, you'll see it here, of why it matters that we support parents. And there's a number of policy messages in here that require us to think about what we're doing in this country that is so necessary and yet so absent from our public policy perspective, from an investment perspective, and what we might begin to think about and fight for. So let's take a listen at each of these 3. They're very short, 20, 22-second videos. So let's start with this one.
Did you understand it though? No.
What our nation has? Lots of devoted parents. What our nation needs? Better ways to support them. Like paid leave for the early days that go too fast. The potential of children depends on support for their parents. It takes a nation, a parent nation.
Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh?
Todd commented about this video earlier that he had seen it. And of course, many of us saw it in the early days of COVID. It was one of these videos that went viral. And it was interesting seeing so many of the comments about why people were so enamored with this short little video of this father and his little boy and how endearing it was. And what we were seeing is that people who, liked it, retweeted, or, reposted, thought it was so unique and not something we typically see, and how adorable it was to see this kind of thing, this kind of engagement between a father, a parent, and their child. And our response to that was, but this is how it should always be, not something that we see, once in a blue moon, and that's why we fall in love with it. This should be the norm. But we don't in this country provide parents the supports to be able to have this kind of time. Again, in this case, we're suggesting that this country, like many OECD countries in the world, already have, which is paid maternity leave, paid paternity leave, paid family leave. So a key message. So let's take a look at the next one with a slightly different message, but similar in terms of the importance of time that parents need for their children.
Oh my God, they're adorable. So brave.
They are, aren't they? What our nation has? Lots of devoted parents. What our nation needs? Better ways to support them. Like flexible work schedules for moments you can't redo. The potential of children depends on support for their parents. It takes a nation, a parent nation.
And then just one last video, a little bit different on the policy front.
Do you like your new room? What our nation has? Lots of devoted parents. What our nation needs? Better ways to support them. Like affordable housing or the security kids need. The potential of children depends on support for their parents. It takes a nation, a parent nation.
So one of several, policy issues that we call out as a reminder of what it takes in this country to raise the next generation effectively, and the supports that parents need, especially in those first 3 years when we know so much now about brain development, about that critical milestone, about the kind of community, a set of communities and conditions in communities that parents today just simply do not have, and why they struggle. And oftentimes, by the way, often feel guilty that they are not doing enough to set their children up for success. There are many others that we could have shown you in terms of the policy ideas and ways in which society could align to the neuroscience. But really what we're trying to do here is this drumbeat of a message that for children to succeed, we need to support parents and caregivers, because they're the key for children's success, especially in those early years. So in addition to the media campaign and the ways in which we're elevating the message through social media and in other ways, is other additional tools. There are other tools and resources that we have begun to develop to fuel the movement, to really build a campaign that is led by parents, led by parent voice and caregivers, toward this idea of a parent nation or a society that better supports parents. So I heard Anil earlier say that he has read the book, Parent Nation. We hope more of you will read the book, because it's just, first of all, it's very well written, very inspiring, very accessible. Dana does a masterful job in taking complex scientific issues and bringing them to life for any of us to really grasp and have this inspiration toward the way that we should be thinking about our society and changing society. Before I talk about these three tools, and then I'm going to go deeper into the parent villages, one other piece of context that I didn't share was how Dana in the book, why she believes that it is so possible for us to make an enormous shift in this country toward investing much more in children and families, toward creating a society that puts children and families at the center. She calls up the powerful AARP model in her book and reminds us that 50, 60, 70 years ago, the population most in need, the concentrated poverty at that time were seniors 65 and older. And it wasn't until the AARP, a powerful lobbying arm, that is what really helped to begin to change that reality for seniors in this country. Because of the AARP today, seniors, that poverty rate has dropped by 70% than what it was 50, 60 years ago. And so today it's not usual to see a senior struggling in the way that they did. Today, the largest concentration and the population greatest in poverty are children 0 to 5. And so we see AARP as an inspiration and a model for what we can envision and achieve if we come together, build this movement. And so that's really the intention here. So I was talking about the book. There is a book discussion guide for those of you that would be interested in doing a book club and a book circle. If you read the book, you will be quite inspired, not only to read it, but then wanting to be involved. We included an action guide also at the back of the book, so that if you are inspired and want to be part of this movement, there are ideas and recommendations and suggestions for how you can be part of this movement. But what was most important to us is how we might galvanize and mobilize parents across this country, so that parents really do become the drivers of systemic change. And so that's when I came and joined Dana to really create strategies and tools and resources that might help fuel the movement of parents and caregivers and allies. So we conceived of this idea of parent villages and created a parent activation toolkit, if you will, that would be that platform and that could help fuel the movement by engaging and equipping parents to become those leaders, to become those change makers in our society toward a parent nation. So let me talk to you a little bit about the concept of parent villages. The idea really here is around building parent power and building the capacity or strengthening the capacity of parents to play a role in shifting mindsets, in pushing for change in this country at whatever level, at a community level, at a state level, at a federal level. And we know there is much more energy today. We saw this growing swell of parents becoming much more vocal and active after COVID and after the experience that they went through to have to manage all of it on their own. We think this is the right moment, and we see the take up. I'll talk about the take up in a minute about this curriculum of parents that are eager to engage and to push for a different society. So the idea here is that through this concept of parent villages, anyone in community can bring together a small group of parents. We recommend 8 to 10 because the conversation can go deeper. And we've seen the kinds of engagement that can happen in small groups of parents and of caregivers. By the way, when we say parents, we mean any adult, caring adult that is responsible for the well-being and the raising of children. It could be a grandparent, a foster parent, a godparent. I'm a godparent to many children, a biological or non-biological parent. So when we say parents, it truly is all inclusive. The parent villages is framed around 4 very energizing and interactive sessions. They're about 90 minutes each. And all of the tools and the curriculum that we've developed is in English and in Spanish. It's also been developed to bring groups together virtually or in person, as you'll see in a minute. So in terms of the goals, here's what we're trying to accomplish and what we so far have gotten very good feedback around in terms of achieving these goals. In general, the idea of parent villages is to foster community amongst parents, to help them forge powerful collective identity, so they could see the power of all parents coming together and then be inspired to fight for change. More specifically, as they go through each of the 4 sessions, parents are beginning to recognize that it's not them that are failing, it's society that is failing our families. I shared that before earlier in the conversation that many parents, in fact, you see this in the book when Dana writes about the stories of the families that she interviewed, that oftentimes parents see themselves as the failures in meeting their children's needs, that they're not doing enough. And they rarely talk about that society should be playing a greater role. That's very different than what we see in other countries, Germany, Italy, other, for sure, the Netherlands, where parents there see and expect society to play a role in raising the next generation. So through the villages, we're helping parents begin to elevate those expectations of society. There's an entire session around embracing their own interests and values and traits toward one of the change maker roles that we see often in the social change literature, whether it's the helper, the advocate, the organizer, the rebel. We added storyteller, but we wanted parents to see themselves as powerful change makers. And then, of course, by the end, we hope we've inspired parents to activate their power. And the curriculum is not prescriptive. We want parents to bring their own priorities to the table, what they want to change in their community on behalf of parents or in their state or in the country. So it's very much building upon parents' own power, but then allowing them, respecting their agency to call out the changes that they want in their society or in their community. So what is in the Parent Village Activation Kit? First of all, there's a scripted curriculum. Pardon me. There's a scripted curriculum that was, from the very beginning, parent informed. When we were ideating the curriculum and the idea of parent villages, we spoke to a lot of parents. And then once we developed some initial drafts, we tested the curriculum. We beta tested over 6 months with 5 different groups of parents around the country. And that really helped to give us the confidence that this activation toolkit, this parent mobilization effort, really did resonate with all parents from all walks of life. The kit includes the 4 session guides. As I mentioned there, it's all scripted. There are highly engaging activities in each of the sessions. All of the handouts that you might need are in the toolkit. There's facilitation guidance and tips. So even if you've never facilitated a group, we've developed it in a way where really anybody can take it on, and we give you a step-by-step guide for you to be able to do that. We've tailored the session so that they can be provided, as I said earlier, either in person or virtually, even with people now feeling more comfortable coming out and meeting in person. We know there are still many parents that have other barriers that otherwise wouldn't be able to participate. So we made sure to stay on the path of remote learning. And so we've developed an entire kit that allows you to bring parents together virtually. All of what we've developed to galvanize and mobilize parents to these villages is available at no cost. I'll make sure that we put in the chat the parentnation.org website. So you can just go there, ask for the toolkit. You'll get an email with 4 links. There are 4 toolkits: English, Spanish, and then for each, virtual and in person. We also welcome communities to co-brand, add your own logo to all of the materials, whether it's the outreach material or the handouts, so that you make it your own. We've tried very, very hard to share with communities and welcome them to adapt the curriculum so that it speaks to their families, to their parents, their history, their lived experience, their culture, their language, so that parents feel respected, but also honored and in who they are as a parent. So there's a lot of opportunity for adaptability, keeping obviously within the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish in terms of a parent nation. So let me quickly share with you just highlights of each of the 4 sessions to give you an idea. I apologize for my cough. It's an old COVID cough that some days I feel is finally gone and then it comes back. Okay, so session 1. Session 1, when parents come together, it's the first time, obviously, in many communities, it might be this group of parents that have met before, but more often than not, they're a new group of parents coming together. So what we're trying to achieve in session 1 is really beginning to foster that community among this group of parents. We want to be able to create a space for them to come and feel supported, but also give support to other parents. We begin the sessions by grounding the group in a set of values that honors all parents. You see the visual here where it says we have inner wisdom. That's one of the 6 Parent Nation founding principles that actually came from parents. And it was a way for us to really set the tone and embrace parents for all of what they are and who they are and what they bring, their challenges and their struggles, but also their dreams and hopes and aspirations for their children. So we ground the group in an activity called the Founding Principles activity with 6 different cards. And on the front of the card, you see the principle. Again, this one says all parents have inner wisdom. In the back of the card, there are a couple of scenarios, and this really helps parents deepen the conversation about this idea of all parents, both deserving support, but having so much in common with what we know about all parents, whether it's that, all parents have inner wisdom, all parents deserve choice, all parents deserve to, have access to tools and resources to raise their children. So there are 6 of these, and this is what grounds the group, not only in session 1, but throughout the rest of the remaining sessions. And it's here and through this activity that parents finally begin to recognize that society has an obligation to help raise the next generation. So, and then we get to session 2, which is all around this idea of forging collective identity. In this session, there are a couple of activities that help parents begin to deepen an understanding of the challenges that all parents face so that they see that they're not alone. But they also begin to imagine a society that truly supports parents. The activity that helps parents get there to imagine a society that truly supports parents is called the Building Blocks activity. And they engage in a number of scenarios of issues that most parents struggle with, and the trade-offs that many parents have to make in raising their children, some trade-offs that are not very good for the development of their children. And through that process, they begin to ask themselves, what would it look like if this country really put children and families at the center? How would this scenario play out differently? So, through their own imagination, they begin to help envision a different society. The other activity in this session is called the Big Shift activity, and that's the visual that you see here with that's an image of a balance or a scale. And through this activity, parents begin to reflect on the gaps in the systems and recognize just how out of balance things are. And once they get through this activity, it's a two-part activity with these there's two of these posters that you see here. They start to see and realize that despite how out of balance things are, that it doesn't have to be this way, that we actually can change society by mobilizing and galvanizing and really doing the hard work of advocating for a different way of being in this country. By the end of session 2, we saw this time and time again when we were testing the curriculum and engaging parent leaders and parent leader organizations. What happens after session 2 is parents start to ask, so what do we do? How can we play a role? Which is the perfect question to ask. And that's what leads us to session 3, which is all around helping parents find their voice and begin to explore this idea of being a change maker. We knew early on that we had to dispel the myth of what it takes to be a change maker. You know, oftentimes when you talk to parents, they'll say, well, I'm just a parent, or I don't have time, or I don't have any skills that are around advocacy or leadership. And so we dispel that and talk about what it takes to be a change maker, and then help them learn about the various social change roles, and then match their own interests and strengths to those roles through an activity called the change maker activity. It's a 2-part activity. In the second part of the session, they're going through the change maker speed dating game, where they begin to explore and learn from each other the social change role that they identified most aligns to their interests and strengths. Some of the groups that we've tested with this have said it's one of the most engaging activities, and it's sort of like a personality test where you actually begin to see where you match up. And it's a powerful way to enter into session 4, which is around beginning to think about what you might want to do to fight for change or to push for change. In session 4, it's the last session of the Parent Village experience. There are 3 or 4 different activities, so there's a lot going on in this session. There's a bingo game. You see that in the smaller thumbnail there. That bingo game helps parents begin to kind of understand the context in our country for what has been happening around supporting parents and children. There's some historical events, times where we've moved, took 1 step forward, 2 steps back in terms of national policy or state policies. There are various organizations in the bingo game that have been advocating for parents and for children for a long time, again, so that they see what's in play and what more we need to do and why parent voice matters to the work that we already have in this country and need more of. There are also examples of parents who have been parent leaders and made change so that they can see themselves as change makers. And then finally, there are important concepts like neuroplasticity, toxic stress, and other bits of information that we thought would be helpful to parents. Parents, when they start playing the game, it's only a 20-minute game and then 10-minute discussion, find themselves wanting to keep playing because they're so eager to keep learning. So we actually developed a way for them to have all of the material to learn about all of the prompts in the bingo game. The second part of session 4, and you see that in the larger visual, that actually is a big poster. That's their Parent Village Plan of Action poster. So in this part of the session, parents are starting to identify very concretely what they would want to fight for, why it matters, who their allies might be. And there's a number of tools and resources that help them fill out their plan of action, if you will. And then session 4 ends with the Parent Nation pledge of what they might want to do. And it could be, we know parents are busy, especially parents of very young children. We don't expect that all parents will want to engage in an advocacy effort right away. Some do, and some have in some of the villages that have already been hosted. But some might simply think differently about who they vote for next time, or what they expect their leaders to be doing. And all of that adds up to change. This is what the entire toolkit looks like, that those that are hosting parent villages have access to. Again, all of these resources are free. Our goal really is to provide the field, those that are providing parent leadership, parent advocacy, parent organizing, all of these groups with the tools and resources that they need to help parents, again, become the drivers of systemic change. And then finally, just a fun slide with photos of all of the different groups. There were 6 different groups around the country that tested the curriculum, that engaged parents in all of the activities, that helped us tweak and improve the curriculum in a way that spoke to all parents. So here there are, very diverse groups of parents from the right, from the left, religious, not religious, a variety of ethnic backgrounds. It was an all fathers group, an LGBTQ group, and it just really helped us create a very rich toolkit that we think would resonate to parents across this country. Okay, I'm going to stop here. That's a lot of information that I just shared, Todd. But this is really probably the centerpiece of the campaign that is leveraging Dr. Dana Susskind's book. Again, her book is this call to action for us to fight and push for a society that better supports parents. The Parent Village Toolkit Activation set of resources is really to build the ground movement and build it from the ground up. So I will toss it back to you. I'm sure you have a set of questions, and happy to take questions from others as well.
Thank you so much. I'm actually wishing I kept my video on so you could just see me enthusiastically nodding throughout the entirety of the presentation. Not a slide went by for me where there wasn't something that resonated wholeheartedly. And I noted earlier, I'm in a school of social work. This is so aligned with what the social work profession is about. I almost was literally jumping out of my chair. The way that families—
I share with you that that's my background. So I bring it to this work. I mean, I bring everything that I've learned in my entire career, but I'm always centered in my profession as a social worker. So I'm so happy to hear you say that.
That's right. And I know, that's right. We have connected on that front, and it really shows just the orientation here, the bringing families into the ideation of this very program. So parent voice is embedded from the very start, a very inclusive view of parents, a lot of different caregiving roles that folks can enter into and see themselves in this Parent Nation program. This community building element, fostering that collective identity and activating power, fighting for change. And so, this kind of life course intervention perspective, many of us probably on this call can appreciate the interventions that exist to help promote well-being over the life course that involve psychoeducation, skill building, healing from trauma, these kind of more micro-focused orientations. And something like this, bringing to the forefront the larger systems that ought to be transformed, that in and of themselves would serve as powerful interventions for social good, and would create a more stable container for folks to benefit from the micro-level interventions, right? I can do more psychoeducation and skill building when I have stable housing, when I know where my next meal is coming from, when I can develop close relationships with my children through flexible work schedules. So just all the things that are being brought together, I'm hopeful for those here, you'll see yourself in everything that was just shared, even if you're kind of a more micro level interventionist, or certainly a more macro level interventionist, and just seeing how those two things are so interconnected. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, honestly, to separate them. But I want to open the floor certainly for questions. So I'll be looking at the chat, and maybe some of my colleagues on the call and others will feel free to jump in with questions. But maybe I'll throw one out to get the ball rolling here. So as you've worked with families and kind of delivering this content, which is free, by the way. That I love that so much that you noted that there's no cost to this. You can download these materials. What are some of the common barriers or challenges or obstacles that parents on the ground face as they try to kind of work through these sessions or modules, and then after they finish them, go on to do the sort of kind of fighting for change that they've been trained on?
That's a great question. And we actually, when we had already finished developing all of the resources in the toolkit, we added one more after a number of information sessions that we were doing for communities across the country to learn about this. And many of them were asking about, how do I manage this barrier or that barrier? So we put together, and it's in the toolkit via a link, what's called the roadmap to hosting a successful parent village. And in that roadmap, there is one part of the journey that we wanted to make sure that we addressed and that folks think about. So oftentimes the parents that we would hope are part of these parent villages, that we want their voice, and these are parents that are often marginalized, left out of the conversation, not engaged. Generally, it's because they don't have childcare. They might not have transportation. They might be working, or instead of putting time toward coming to a parent village, they might want to find one more gig to work another few hours. So, how do we remove those barriers for participation? So it's really thinking about those, like, can we provide childcare for parents when they're here, when they're going through the sessions? Can we provide a meaningful but not overly burdensome stipend, so that rather than finding another job, another house to clean, like my housekeeper was telling me, I don't have time for that, I really got to go find another house I can clean. That if by offering a stipend, it kind of could replace that for her having to go find another job for another $20 or $30 or $40. So providing vouchers, providing food, that they bring their children to the session and there's childcare, there's somebody that's going to feed them. Transportation, so maybe transportation vouchers. So there are ways in which we can remove these barriers for parents to participate. Obviously, we try to remove the barrier of participation if they don't have transportation, for example, or just time and childcare, by doing the virtual version, which also has helped. So that's sort of the first part of the challenges and barriers. And we were very intentional to think about these and respond to these, because I personally was concerned that who we would see participating in parent villages might mostly be upper middle class parents who've got more bandwidth and time. And then the conversation it'll still be rich. They're parents and they want the best for their children, but the policy priorities may not be what we need to focus on for the vast majority of families who are, neglected and not have the supports that they need. So, there's an equity issue here that we needed to attend to. So that means that if you're, thinking about hosting a village, that you might, need to think about the resources that you will need. Even though all the material is free, there will be resources that you might need to overcome some of these barriers. So you might go to your local United Way, or, right now school systems have a lot of resources because of post-COVID federal funds, and they're providing resources for parent engagement. So there are ways and tips in that guide that we provided recently for hosts or facilitators of parent village to think about where they can get resources to remove some of these barriers. Afterwards, so after parents participate in the 4 sessions and they want to continue, that's the next barrier for you to, kind of how do we make sure we're not raising expectations, because now parents might want to really get involved and engage, but now who will support them in that effort? So there are ways in which we've provided resources in the toolkit that can, if you as an organization can't continue to provide support on that advocacy issue that parents want to fight for, you can do a handoff to an organization that is advocating for those issues that these parents might be interested in. So we developed a handout by state. So there are 52 handouts with a list of organizations in your state that are advocating for a number of things that parents desperately want: childcare, paid leave, transportation, housing, education resources. So they can connect to these organizations and become allies with them and expect for them to support these parents. And oftentimes my experience is that these advocacy organizations want parent voice. They're just not sure how to find them.
The comprehensive nature of all of these materials is amazing to me. Having a state-by-state list that's already constructed at your fingertips that can be downloaded and used, that I just find that to be really, really incredible. And I'm so happy you mentioned kind of this equity issue and thinking about, you know, the very parents that would probably benefit most from entering into this community, this parent nation, are the ones that might have the hardest time getting there for all of the logistic reasons and real life reasons and all the demands that you noted. And so I thought that was really helpful. And so this virtual format and having materials to guide a virtual engagement. Of course, we can't assume that everyone has the access to a computer and internet that would facilitate that, but that being a way to transcend geographic barriers and physical obstacles and transportation, that seems very promising. So I was delighted to see that too. And I see Shirley has joined the video feed here. Shirley, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just a quick comment. So thank you very much, Yolie. I thought that was a terrific presentation, and I learned a lot about what Parent Nation is and the whole idea in the movement. You mentioned that when Dana had written her first book on reflection, she felt it didn't really have the impact that she'd hoped for. I'm just wondering, have you thought about, or do you have some formal way of trying to track the impact of this whole huge effort that you're doing? It's across social media, it's with meetings and so on. Do you have any metrics in the short term or the longer term that you're kind of looking at? You know, what will success look like to you?
That's an excellent question. So we have some short-term and then longer-term plans to measure success. So in the short term, I mean, the short term is the take-up, right? Do we have organizations that think this is valuable, that is mission aligned to what they're doing, that gives them an additional set of tools where they can bring parents together? So, you know, if I were to see in the next year 500 parent villages across the country, that would be success to me. Because we think that could be a snowball effect. And then we want to build on what we learned from the beta testing, where we did a pre and post survey with parents and with facilitators. And that feedback and those pre and post surveys helped us to see whether in fact we met the outcomes and goals by session for each of the sessions and then in total. So it's a self-report. It's not yet a scientific evaluation. We may get there, and then once we see a critical mass. But then the longer term measure of success is that we've built enough of a movement to lay the groundwork to create something similar to AARP. We already have, Dana's already developed a kind of an idea and a framework. She even has a name for it. So it's, kind of building on this ground movement that could set the path toward, it's called the National Association of Parents and Caregivers, by the way, the National Association for Parents and Caregivers. So that would be, our longer term success, that this could fuel that effort.
Thanks, Yolie. And someone just popped in the chat a comment, and I can read that out, saying there are many organizations, private, nonprofit, community, university projects, local public health, that could integrate these materials into their ongoing work with parents in local communities. So it could be a resource for lots of different small groups.
Absolutely. You see me moving around because I see a battery little notification that my battery's about to go out. So I finally found the computer. Sorry, Todd.
No problem at all. No, and just
now.
That's good. Good catch. Wouldn't want you to black out all of a sudden.
No.
Totally agree with that comment. I'm already getting ideas about some community partners I'm working with in North Carolina, and getting excited at sharing more information about this program, which might be useful to some work that's going on.
Fantastic. Well, we could be of any support on that end. You let us know.
Absolutely. I'm getting some gratitude here in the chat, folks thanking you for this session.
I am, if it's okay with you, Todd, I wanted to offer a link because, you know, Dana felt awful that she
Please.
couldn't join. I wanted to provide a link to a session that Dana did at the Aspen Institute of Ideas around Parent Nation, so that you actually can hear her presentation at your leisure. So I'm just going to put that in the chat.
Yes, please feel free to add any materials into the chat. Another attendee here asked, how can we access the materials? It sounds like Parent Nation, there's a website there that can be used to access. And there's the, thank you, Mary, just put the link there in the chat.
Oh, great. Thank you, Mary. I was about to put it.
So we're off to the races on that front.
We do have, for those organizations that are interested in learning more about the virtual tools, so it's very different when you offer a village virtually. We use Google tools, so reach out to us. You'll see how to reach us at parentnation.org, and we could do some one-on-one training or just going through the curriculum with you. We don't yet have a formal training. We've been asked to develop a train the trainer, which we're considering for next year. But in the meantime, if your organization wants some support and a walkthrough of all the materials in the curriculum, we're happy to do that one-on-one with you or with your team.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you so much for mentioning that and for sharing these materials.
Absolutely.
In the chat.
I'll put the email just in case.
Yeah, please.
For any outreach folks need to have with us. There we go.
Perfect. Well, I'm cognizant of the time here. Yolie, truly cannot thank you enough. I was absolutely fascinated by this presentation. I think everyone in attendance is likely to be in agreement with me on that. So I'm looking forward to digging more into these materials. And for all of you who are able to join us, thank you again. Do not hesitate to reach out and look into these materials more following the session. This has been recorded. It can be accessed later via YouTube, and stay tuned for future webinars. I think listserv emails will be going out on that front. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks,
Take
Yolie.
care.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, everyone.